have these nice pews set up right here. Bunch of Methodists. I want to welcome everybody here, wherever you are, near or far, or watching from or remotely from afar. We want to say a special welcome to our friends from Cantico Nuevo. So thank you very much for being here and singing with us and for us. And as we get started, I just wanted to make sure people heard some sad news. It seems like we're starting each of these Vespers services with sad news, but it's good to be together to hear these things. Many of you will remember Doreen Wall, who for 20 years ran the West Side campaign against hunger, retiring at the young age of 80. A force to be reckoned with, for sure. And this past weekend, Doreen passed away at the age of 93. And I'd just say that she was ready, and she had done what she came on earth to do. But those of us who worked with her for many years miss her. And she certainly was a fixture around this building for so many years. So we want to remember Doreen's family, especially Carla and Michael, her two children. Let's begin with our meditation within our darkest night.
I invite you to rise either in body or in spirit as we call ourselves to worship this evening. Like a newborn baby crying, our soul cries out to you, O God.
The world is laboring hard over war and not laboring enough over peace.
We feel constrained by the violence of empire and helpless before the industry of weapons.
What protection is in danger? What peace is found in a lullaby?
Remind us, O God, that you are with us.
Emmanuel, God with us.
You gave birth to the universe and joined us here on earth.
You free us from the bonds of fear. You give insight to those who would see.
In the arrival of the newborn King, we experience life abundant.
Help us to dance with joy, for joy in weary bones is a holy resistance.
Let's sing the first three verses of the first Noel, which is hymn 245.
All
In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
Veinticinco de diciembre, fum, fum, fum. 25 de diciembre, fum, fum, fum. Un niñito muy bonito ha nacido en un portal. Su carga de rosa parece una flor hermosa, fum, fum, fum. Las estrellas en el cielo, fum, fum, fum. Las estrellas en el cielo, fum, fum, fum. En la noche silenciosa alumbraban con su luz a los que al establo iban, esta luz los dirigía, fum, 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 fum. Venid, venid, pastorcillos, fum, 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 fum. Venid, venid, pastorcillos, fum, fum, fum. Venid con la pandereta y castañuelas al portón, a adorar en el fondo que ha nacido en este suelo, fum, 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 fum. On December 5 and 20, fum, fum, fum. On December 5 and 20, fum, fum, fum. When a child was born this night, so meek and mild, so meek and mild. Fum, making holy, in a stable, mean and lonely, fum, fum, fum. On December 5 and 20, fum, fum, fum. On December 5 and 20, fum, fum, fum. There's most important day, let us rejoice, let out and play. Prepare to go and then we go with free response and candy. Fum, 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 fum. God will send us days of feasting, fum, 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 fum. God will send us days of feasting, fum, fum, fum. On the conscious and old, we're young and old, we're young and old. Fum, fum, ever singing of God's glory, fum, fum, fum.
Joy from Ross Gay. My hunch is that joy is an ember for or precursor to wild and unpredictable and transgressive and unboundaried solidarity. And that solidarity might incite further joy, which might incite further solidarity, and on and on. My hunch is that joy emerging from our common sorrow, which does not necessarily mean we have the same sorrows, but that we, in common sorrow, might draw us together. It might depolarize us and de-atomize us enough that we can consider what in common we love. And though attending to what we hate in common is too often all the rage, and it happens also to be very big business, noticing what we love in common and studying that might help us survive. It's why I think of joy, which gets us to love, as being a practice of survival. Now let's keep singing the first Noel.
So I have a story about something I just had to tell. While preparing for our move to New York City back in 2011, I started a blog, Food Transformations. I decided it would be fun to see how many creative meals I could concoct while cleaning out our fridge and pantry without buying any new ingredients. Food Transformations kept me pleasantly distracted during the move. After arriving in New York City, I had to buy new ingredients, so I pivoted to transforming recipes from our family's cookbook. I took recipes shared by the women of my family and turned them into vegan-friendly versions. So my mom's beef stew became portobello mushroom stew, and Grandma A's sugar cookies got a makeover with some Earth's Balance buttery spread and non-dairy milk and flax eggs. And Grandma D's apricot muffins were easily adapted by switching out the sour cream for coconut yogurt. I was making my own way from the foundation laid by the family I had left back in Michigan. Now, after a year or so of this, I realized that while I enjoyed the cooking aspect of the blog, what I really liked writing about were the people and the experiences that inspired the recipes or went along with them. Plus, I was having a lot of experiences that had nothing to do with food, and I needed to tell someone about them. So a new blog was born, Transforming Mommy, with the tagline, because transformation is a journey. I didn't really have any objective in mind other than to share stories and practice writing. I wrote about my failed attempt at a 3-day detox cleanse. I like to eat too much to do a cleanse. Neil's melanoma diagnosis and treatment, the work of removing a splinter from a toddler's foot, a birthday party disaster averted, a panic attack on the subway platform, and learning to pray, the death of our beloved dog, the time that 2-year-old Lincoln peed on my laptop. That's a good one. 9-year-old Caden's first solo plane trip to visit family back in Michigan. And that one time that someone pooped on my shower loofah, and I scrubbed my armpit with it before realizing what had happened. These are the ridiculous things of life that you have to tell someone about. When I started, I was writing just for myself and my Michigan family, for members of a small online writing group that I had joined, and for a few random WordPress bloggers who stumbled across my posts. Then one day after a school picnic, a mom from Lincoln's class emailed me and asked for my double chocolate zucchini muffin recipe. So I pulled up the link to the recipe on my blog and I sent it off without a second thought. The next day she emailed me. I was up way too late last night reading every single post. I feel so seen. I hope you don't mind, but I shared your blog with a few other people. In the days and weeks that followed, more emails hit my inbox, and moms I had never met approached me on the playground to tell me about how much they related to something in the blog. I realized that even though what I wrote was personal, the feelings and the experiences I was having, they weren't unique to me. By sharing a side of me that I didn't easily allow others to see, I made new friends, and I changed relationships with old friends. The more I shared what I thought were the most embarrassing, ugliest, scariest parts of me, the more my anxiety dissolved, and the happier and more content I was. Like little miracles, the things that I had once held trapped inside, they became beacons of light. Suddenly, none of us felt so alone. Transforming Mommy has been dormant for several years now, but what I learned from it still informs me. Telling stories matters. It's necessary. It helps us see ourselves, and it helps us see others. When we refuse to look at ourselves and refuse to be seen, it becomes impossible to see our neighbor. And when we're unable to see our neighbor, we're unable to see Jesus. And when we're unable to see Jesus, it's impossible to follow his way. So we need storytelling. We need it more than ever right now. Amen?
El cartonero con su familia cosecha cajas por la ciudad. Es cartonero porque no quiere pedir limosna para comer. Y aunque quisiera robar no puede porque se acuerda de su querer. Cartonero, buen obrero, que te matas lo peor de la noche, compañero de la calle, gran señor. Aquella noche volviendo al barrio, soy un tendito en el callejón, medio desnudo casi en el barro, hay un bebito en el corralón. La cartonera le dio una caja y la limpita me en Taiwán. El cartonero le hace una cuna y los changuitos le ofrecen pan. Cartonero, buen obrero, que esperas algo mejor. Te hacen niños
I was going to write that down so I would remember it. In July, I went with dear friends to a funky makerspace in Brooklyn. I made a journal. I was going to use it to document democracy, my thoughts and ideas about the election and the political process in general. That journal has held a place of honor front and center on my desk, and the pages remain blank. Fast forward, election day, stress baking, news overload. Scrolling through Spotify, I stumbled upon Sweet Honey in the Rock, the music that powered my college years. Ella's Song by Bernice Johnson Reagan. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. And that which touches me most is that I had a chance to work with people, passing on to others that which was passed on to me. 8 dozen cookies later, allowing myself to be swallowed up by that way too loud music, I remembered walking through Beardsley Terrace, a housing project in Bridgeport, with my father. It was the summer of 1984. I had just graduated from college with an interdisciplinary major studying the role of religion in the progressive political change. We were canvassing for Mondale Ferraro, Geraldine Ferraro. A woman was on the Democratic Party ticket. I know my dad and I had discussed the issues before setting out. It was an unspoken family rule that we had to be able to explain why we were participating in any political activity before we left the house. But when we approached an old couple in their backyard and they invited us in to talk, and the man leaned across the kitchen table and looked me straight in the eye, "You tell me why you will honor these people with your vote?" I said simply, "Because I want to vote for a woman." There must have been more to our encounter because our glasses, maybe iced tea, maybe water, were refilled at least once. Yet I would be lying if I recounted the rest of the conversation because I don't remember it. As we walked towards the next family on our list, a man stopped my dad. Like my father, this man was a community organizer. I think he lived on that street. My dad introduced me, casually mentioning my recent graduation. 3 of us sat on a bench and talked politics for a while. I know we must have been given a long list of doors to knock. I don't remember any of the others. I remember walking down the street with my father. The sidewalks were cracked and uneven, so sometimes we walked in the street. I remember the 2 of us going back to the local Democratic office to make our report. They gave us a big blue lawn sign with Mondale Ferraro printed in bold white letters. And that which touches me most is that I had a chance to work with people, passing on to others that which was passed on to me. In his later years, my father and I had our differences. And I've had a hard time letting go of those difficult memories. On Wednesday, November 6th, I sat in this sanctuary, with many of you, trying to embrace Lee's wise words about moving from despair towards lament. We were asked to lift up names of those who inspired us, whose memory continues to sustain us for the journey. From my spot in the very last pew, I called out the name Roger Floyd. Loving God, help us to be open to our stories as they change. Amen.
Monday was the birthday of my friend Tolu. She died almost 3 years ago now from terminal cancer. And inevitably, every year I scroll through all of my photos and screenshots of texts between us, reliving all the joy of our friendship as part of my grieving process. This year, I came across a silly text that I don't remember about meatballs. To know Tolu is to know that cooking and sharing food was her ministry. She loved food, and she loved to share it, and it brought her and everyone she shared it with immense joy. Early on in her diagnosis, Tolu decided she was going to write a book, which was a long-time dream of hers. But with the impairments that the cancer caused, she needed help. So I had the enormous privilege of accompanying her in the early stages of this writing and editing process. I would go over to her house and sit next to her at the table or in her bed as she reflected and wrote on what it felt like to face her early death. And this brings us back to the meatball text. On one of those mornings, on my way to her house, I received the text, a text that really sums up Tolu's ethos so succinctly. I have some really incredible soup with tiny meatballs that I'd love to share with you for lunch, if that sounds good to you. What an absurdly ordinary text, so ordinary in the midst of the unimaginable and unthinkable. I remember sitting at her kitchen table, slurping up those delicious tiny meatballs beside her, joy in the eating and receiving, joy in her presence. As so many of her capacities slipped away, in this moment, she could give what felt so hers to give. That day at her table over those tiny meatballs, we shared a heartbreaking conversation about what it would be like for her husband and her 2 small children to keep living in their home when she was gone. I had no words to respond to her probing questions, and we cried together in silence for a long time. How do I make sense of the joy that I feel in seeing this ordinary text and remembering those tiny meatballs from my friend Tulu? And the joy I feel in my body when I think about the gift of sitting at the table with someone I love so deeply, when it is also one of the most sorrowful encounters I hold. In the account of Jesus' birth in Matthew that Aurora read, the wise ones are following a star, and it stops over Jesus, and they are overjoyed. They have arrived at what they've been looking for, the birth of Jesus, this starlit wonder of God's presence with and among us is full of joy. And yet, the verses that follow describe that this baby Jesus is born under a cruel empire with a violent king who orders all of the babies in Bethlehem 2 years old and under to be killed. The joy of Jesus, the joy of God's presence among us, is within and among the horror of a violence hard to imagine. And yet, if we look around, horrific violence, not unlike the violence faced by the Holy Family under Herod, seems to be everywhere. In the ceaseless deaths of adults and children in Gaza, the lives lost in more and more frequent school shootings like that in Wisconsin this week, in the Methodists killed by their Methodist kin in Nigeria just a few days ago, violence fomented by and rooted in homophobia, in the violence of our immigration system, in all of the personal and communal sorrows and griefs that we carry. Ross Gay writes that joy emerging from our common sorrow might just be what brings us together, what ignites our solidarity, what brings us together to share in our common loves. In this, joy is a practice of survival, of resistance to all that is death-dealing. In this season, in times like these, this feels like the gift of Jesus to me. That God's presence among us and with us brings joy to the world precisely because it is in and among the world. It is joy tethered to all of the complexities of being human, with the capacity to be with all that is: sorrow, grief, the horrors of war and violence, and also joy and connection and solidarity and love. Jesus doesn't bring good news in a bubble. The joy we proclaim to the world of Jesus' birth is joyful precisely because it is found in the midst of the unimaginable and unthinkable. That is the good news. May we go and tell it. Amen. And now I'd like to invite us just for a moment into some conversation with our neighbor. So if you are up for it, I urge you to consider just turning to the person next to you and sharing a joy of your day, whether complicated or simple. Maybe we need a simple joy. And we'll take a few minutes and then come back together. 30 more seconds. Let us give thanks for the joys of today and look forward to the joys of tomorrow. And now let us sing Joy to the World together.
Will you join me in prayer? Dear God, this is a challenging time of year. The dark creeps in before 5 p.m. and the sun peeks out after 7 a.m. The nights are long. The news is not good. Adding to that is the rush of the Christmas season that has many of us truly forgetting what is important. We spend too much time worrying if we are checking off our to-do lists as fast as we should, or fretting over that package that won't arrive in time, or maybe losing sleep over travel. If we allow them in, the distractions can take over our lives, and so can a bad news cycle. So we are grateful, God, for this midweek pause, to embrace this dark night, to stop and remember what is important and what we should focus on. A dear friend's delicious meatballs, renewing a family tradition we once thought was corny, baking Christmas cookies for people we will never meet, opening our hearts to prepare to celebrate the birth of the Christ child, to remember the reason that we sang tonight, Joy to the World, to remember that we will be singing it 7 days from now, and to try to remember to sing it as we move into the new year and the days ahead. May we all remember that. Amen.
And now we send ourselves out with joy, because there are so many reasons for joy despite everything else. And so we give thanks for the joy of music, the joy of friends, new and old, the joy of profound and simple words spoken from this space, the joy of just being together, and the joy of some snacks that have been provided following our service. So, what, Lee? What? So, go out with joy, but don't do it yet.